Welcome to what are some of the best D&D campaign ideas you've ever had, Part 3. This is also the final installment of this one too. There will be a few new threads started very shortly, and please let me know what you think in the comments.
I've been running games for 30 plus years in standard D&D settings, and my own. In general, my best campaign I could not really describe in less than a novel. It is a full world campaign for multiple sets of characters covering years of in-game time, and all these plots carefully interact with each other. That said, one of the more interesting and totally blindsided campaign ideas I had was as follows. The party, at first level, are visited out of thin air by a beautiful woman with large white feathery wings, wearing robes of white trimmed in silver and gold. She told them she was an agent of the deity, the cleric, and the paladin, and the group followed. Went on to explain that the world was in danger, and deity had foreseen that it was their group who would be instrumental in preventing the greatest calamity that could possibly occur to a world. This agent of their deity sent them off on many quests, most taking place in the inner and outer planes. At each quest they were to retrieve something from the plane which could serve as a powerful symbolic and mystical essence of the plane. At the end of each quest, the agent would again appear and reward the group handsomely. Very handsomely. Once all these essences were gathered, they were told they needed to craft something out of them, a model of the world tree, which needed to be crafted on the forge and with the hammer of Hephaestus. So the group stealthily entered Olympus, by this time they were 14th level or so, stole the smithing hammer of Hephaestus, and crafted this object on this forge. Upon completing, they were discovered by the Cyclops, which aided Hephaestus at the forge, and the group fled. Being generally good, they were not eager to get into a fight in heaven. Finally, they had forged the very thing which would save the world. They were instructed to go to a remote place of power in the world, and there perform a ritual. Upon arriving at this location, they found angelic servants of their deity, among the most powerful, barring their way, commanding the group repent their evil ways, and take this last chance to not destroy the world by casting it into the abyss. As the devout cleric and paladin attempted to explain, they were in fact servants of that same deity and trying to save the world, and the angels were telling them that they were in fact enemies. The agent arrived, in the company of powerful demons and devils, accompanied by a demon lord, whom, as it turns out, is who had been answering the prayers and granting the power to the cleric and the paladin all along. The agent was always an Irenaeus, a demon which takes the form of a beautiful woman with feathery wings. The group never once doubted she was an angel. In truth, had any ever used some form of alignment detections, wards, lie detection, or alignment detections, they would have known. During their quests, the acts that they had been asked to perform started out in the realm of good, and slowly each one was just a little darker. Slow enough, even the players did not realize they were actually doing evil. The Demon Lord told them of the ruse, and asked them to look upon their past, to see how he had always taken care of them, had given them power, and treated them far better than any deity would have. So the final act of the adventure was each individual character had to choose sides. The cleric and the paladin had it the toughest, because it would require them to renounce their powers and become essentially fighters. If they side with the Demon Lord and his fiends, they would destroy the angels, and by using the ritual, cast the entire world into the abyss and become a new layer in the 666 layers of the abyss, ruled over by the Demon Lord. If they side with the angels, they would have to immediately have a boss fight against the Demon Lord, and the angels would have no interest in helping the PCs. Rather, they would focus on getting the corrupted tree artifact from the PC holding it, and then leave the group to its own punishment. If the group splits, they would end up fighting each other, and the Demon Lord and the angels. The big reveal completely blew the players' minds. Not my idea, but I had to post it. It was, for lack of a better term, a poor man's game. We started out at level 0, under retired adventurers doing chores. The village was attacked by goblinoids, and thus we were thrust into the spotlight, barely able to save ourselves. With the village ablaze and a purposely misspoken, GM prerogative, message from a dying villager, we ran off to hide our shame with nothing but what we had on our backs. Our party was hunted for several years, both trying to survive and remake ourselves. Never able to stay in place for a few days, we were pursued by bounty hunters for our role in the massacre of Foggy Bottom. They were everywhere, a whisper here and there, always breathing down our necks. We lived on the outskirts of society, using improvised and salvaged equipment. Many a time we had to leave behind rewards or useful items as the pursuers came close. After many sessions, we decided to finally go home and face the music, and face the crimes we were wanted for. Our GM had us running from families and the authorities the entire time, and hired hands to bring us to them. Comically, it was for us to be celebrated as heroes, delaying the invaders, not as the culprits. I don't really do traditional D&D. I frequently use the D&D rules, but I use them for decidedly non-traditional purposes. I've had this idea in my head for years, and I've tried multiple times under multiple systems. My last 2 attempts were Pathfinder and D&D 5th edition. The PCs are a group of people who loosely know each other from 21st century Earth. They are perhaps extraordinary in their own ways, but nothing that the world wouldn't notice. By coincidence, they find themselves all at the same subway station, trying to catch the same train in the middle of the night. They board the train along with some other people. The only one that stands out is a man in worn, stained overalls carrying a bag of tools. He looks old-fashioned, like a picture of your granddad at Ellis Island, with a thick, waxed mustache and a newsboy cap. But he doesn't look like he just got off work. He looks wary, like a caged animal, and it seems like he senses something about the PCs. The train leaves the station and all is quiet for a couple of minutes, until halfway to the next station when an otherworldly explosion derails the train and grinds to a halt. Purple flames burn on the walls and drip from the ceiling, but they are cold to the touch and leave characters' skin dry and cracked. Monsters attack the PCs, horrible creatures that look like raisins on chicken legs and whose fangs drip burning venom. The man from the subway car helps them fight, kicking the monsters aside harmlessly. Then the PCs see them. Giant humanoid reptiles with terrible snapping beaks, armed with flails and warhammers, wearing the shells of enormous tortoises as armor. The man takes a hammer out of his bag, though it doesn't seem like it could have fit in there, and he tells the PCs to run. The PCs run, taking access tunnels to avoid more of these monsters, climbing down ladders and staircases, downward, ever downward, until they walk through a drainage tunnel and out into a sunlit meadow. And their tunnel withdraws from them and disappears into the sky. They meet a funny little man who looks like a mushroom who takes them to a wizard who explains that they need to rescue a princess before he can help them get home. Except, she's always in another castle. Well, it was a one-shot, but it was certainly the best session I've run, so I'm going with it. The one-shot was based on real life. The players were playing as themselves, so I can't go into it too much detail. Suffice to say, the party was eating lunch normally at school when a horde of orcs burst out of the nerds, my locker, trampling over the poor guy. Following the horde was a mind-bending reality shift. The school was bubbled off from the outside world and transformed into a sprawling multi-level dungeon. Teachers and classmates alike were mutated horrifically, while the party and a few NPCs, our friends who weren't into D&D, gained fantastical powers, turned into a Lovecraftian dungeon crawl, trying to find a way to get out. It was pretty fun. I once ran a game that was, on the surface, a post-apocalyptic world reduced to medieval tech, and it was set inside a Dyson sphere. That was back in the 3E days, but the sphere had been created magically by quasi-deities during a divine war. So, under the hood, it was a fantasy setting with a grand cosmic divine conflict. But I didn't tell them any of the under-the-hood stuff. The game starts out with them being drawn by lots for their local farming community to be the town's marshals and errand boys for the year. And that started a very slow-burn plot of adventures that were errands for the town that were actually connected. A farmer's grain silo got attacked by what were thought to be vermin, or some farmer thought they saw mutants, orcs, out on the frontier. Turns out they were in the start of a mutant tribe migration, and that turned out to be a refugee situation because the mutant lands were being invaded by undead. Because the quasi-deity that created the mutants, Dr. Moreau style, was in a tiff with another quasi-deity whom he had killed and was now a lord of undeath instead of a lord of life. That played out over the course of 2 years. One character discovered psionic abilities, another ascended to paladinhood after a near-death experience, another became a cleric after witnessing the paladin's transformation. They slowly found out about the Dyson sphere, the pantheon of quasi-deities, etc. It all sort of came to an end, on a cliffhanger, when 2 of the core players moved away. We never really got to get full closure. I tried to run a 1,000 Years Later game using D20 Modern, but it didn't really have the same spark.
Hi guys, thanks for watching. Please let me know what you think in the comments, and if you haven't already, if you could consider liking and subscribing and hit the thumbs up. I really don't like begging, but I really hope to have a channel left by the time I get monetized again. I do read the comments, and if you've got any suggestions or ideas for videos in the future, please let me know. And finally, before I go, a big thanks to Matthew for narrating this video. He's done a few for me now before all this kicked off, but he's been a great help. Thanks.